Good morning and welcome to the Morning Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ham, coming to you as always from the Spotlight Studios in Morristown, New Jersey. We got a great panel today. We're talking marketing. So a little bit different, not a real estate specific topic, but a topic that can cover a lot of different industries. We have a great panel, all of who were former original Morning Spotlight LinkedIn video guests. We've done this a couple times where we've had the whole panel former Spotlight guests, but this is great. I mean, Greg, you were week one. Monica started out week two. So you guys were in the Hall of Fame. Ron, you were a little bit later because we didn't get a chance to meet at the beginning, but we'll put you in the Hall of Fame too. So let's meet everybody and get everybody acquainted. Yeah, we'll get everybody acquainted with our panel and then we'll get started. So our first panelist is the founder and head of content creation at MD Inc., Monica Dema. Monica, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
Absolutely. Second panelist is the founder at Tetrapeak, Ron Latz. Ron, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Mike. Looking forward to chasing that Hall of Fame status.
We'll see how you do. It all comes down to the voters, the listeners, okay. the writers. It's a big writer vote. You got to play the politics game. And last but not least, he is a digital marketing strategist at Local IQ, Greg Markowitz. Greg, welcome.
Great to be back.
Great to have you back. All right. So, Monica, we're going to start with you. So we're going to put you on the spot and get you as our leadoff hitter here. So what do you see happening in the field of marketing when it comes to, has there been a shift towards digital content and presence, and how do you get started with a digital presence?
There are so many questions in that one very loaded question, Michael.
We ask hard-hitting questions and we expect good answers, so we'll see how you do.
All right. Well, how do you get started? You write your first blog or your first post, right? Your first LinkedIn message, your first LinkedIn video. When I'm starting with clients and they're creating their own video, I coach them through that process so they're more comfortable. I think after 170 days of Zoom calls and, Remo networking groups, everyone's a little bit more comfortable in front of a camera. So preparing them for that is super important. But getting started with your digital footprint can start with your first blog, your first social post, your first ad campaign, any number of things. But it needs to be purposeful and it needs to be measured and monitored because you don't want to do activities that aren't actually leading to any kind of results or engagement. It needs to have a purpose and it needs to be measured. So I hope that kind of answers all of those questions in one statement.
I think so, but have you seen, has there been more of a shift? Like, I think one of the things that I was curious about before we started this panel was, like, I know that companies, just very broad, general question, companies have been starting to move more towards digital stuff, over the last however many years, but I feel like and the fact that you just said 170 days is like a shock to the system. I had no idea that you were even counting, yeah. But that's a lot of days. Has that accelerated that? And do you see that sticking as we move past this, hopefully at some point soon?
I mean, I've definitely seen it, and I think Ron and Greg have also seen it in their industries where clients that were maybe a little hesitant to go online or have some kind of digital presence are now kind of catching up. I know for me, my clients that some of them I've been chasing for a while to expand their reach, now it's resonating. They're increasing their ad spend because now their competitors are decreasing, and their sales after 2 or 3 months of doing this have been great, or their leads or calls, whatever the call to action is that can lead to sales and closed business is definitely happening. But it's the long game. So although they're doing this now, it needs to be sustainable and they need to continue doing this because now their companies that they're working with, if it's B2B, or their customers, if it's more of an e-commerce platform, they're going to expect the same amount of content and the same engagement from those companies as they are getting now.
Right.
I mean, you're doing it, Michael, to put you on the spot, right? You are consistently putting out content. And now what happens if you have to go back in the office every week?
Right.
You might shift your scheduling. So with all of my clients, it's important to remain consistent.
Gotcha. So Greg, you were, let me just start that question over. How do you gauge a successful digital strategy? Like what makes, how do you do this the right way?
Well, you're keeping it up with the loaded questions, that's for sure. There's a lot of things that go into that. Really, it starts out with each individual's goals, right? So before we customize a strategy, we got to know what the end game is. We have to know, is there, certain small businesses just come to me and say, Greg, I need a Facebook page. I need to post stuff to it. I need, a few followers, and I'm happy with that. But in large part, if your ultimate goal is either sales or new clients, strategy has to be focused on getting you there. And I think at the end of the day, and we've talked about this before, there's a lot of vanity metrics out there. So, you don't want to just look at, all right, let's say I have a Facebook ad or a Google AdWords campaign running, and I got my ad seen this many times. At the end of the day, that doesn't translate to dollars and cents for your business. So you want to look at everything from, if it's an e-commerce platform like Monica referenced before, you want to look at sales. Those are the easiest campaigns to judge. You can check how a digital strategy led to sales and then look at your return on investment.
Gotcha. So this is lining up beautifully. So I outlined this so well. Ron, we're getting you in now. So here we go. So how do you align the marketing end and the sales end, kind of building off what Greg was just saying?
Love the continuation of loaded questions here. It's great. To kind of talk through as well what Monica and Greg had brought up. I think Monica hit the nail on its head in terms of just getting started, but it's also really important to understand the intent and the motivations behind what you're doing so that you can gauge the success and understand whether or not that campaign actually drove the result that you were looking to achieve. So before you just get started, whether it's that first blog or that first piece of content or your first social post, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to build awareness? Are you looking for something that's more short-term and you're considering performance marketing and paid ads where it's more transactional and they're going to convert to a client quickly? Or are you going to invest in something more long-term, more organic content, something that's going to help build brand awareness over time and start attracting people to you versus technically, an outbound sale? When you talk about determining the success factors with Greg, spot on there. We're really looking at business results. I try to talk to my clients in terms of the amount of revenue that is being generated from particular activities. And it's not always easy, to get a one-to-one attribution to figure out where that return came from. But instead of necessarily looking at the vanity metrics like the likes or the reactions, taking a look a little bit deeper into the overall, client acquisition costs. What are the lifetime value of those clients? How many people are converting into appointments? What are our marketing efforts doing to contribute into, this funnel, this pipeline? So now that we've looked at both the marketing and the sales component, I think the best way for them to look to work together is really through collaboration. I've done that with Monica. I've done that with Greg. I've worked with you, really trying to understand both sides of the aisle so that we're hitting what the consumer wants and not necessarily what we want.
Awesome. So Monica, we're going to bring you back in here. And I heard that there's a tree being cut down outside your house, so hopefully it doesn't ruin our audio here. But so you mentioned earlier that I've been doing a lot of my own stuff, right? And there are a lot of companies that are doing stuff on their own, right? So what are some tips that you would give people when you're trying to do it yourself, right? So like what shouldn't you be doing?
You shouldn't be doing things that can come back and haunt you, right? So posting content that is evergreen, something that's super related or hyper-focused on COVID is hopefully not going to be relevant next year. So thinking long-term, you want content to be evergreen and usable. Obviously laws might change in law for Ron's case, or rules might change in Google Analytics, and so you have to change the content of blogs at that point. But you want something to last forever or as long as possible so you can reuse, repurpose, repackage, or repost that blog. The second thing to note is you don't have to do everything all at once. So looking at it from an e-commerce level, if you're on Instagram, you don't have to necessarily also be on Snapchat, on TikTok, on Reels, on stories, on all of the things at all of the time, because that's going to be really hard to sustain, right? and your audience is not on all of the platforms. So pick one or two that are super reliable for the people that you're trying to go for, and really maximize and optimize those channels as opposed to a little bit on everything. And the last thing is just to be genuine and authentic, because that comes across as well. I think the middle of March into April, some places around the country were promoting vacations. I'm like, do you not realize what's going on right now? Now's not the time to promote a vacation. It's maybe a time to have like an Instagram live where you're showing how you make your cocktails. So you're still getting out there in front of an audience that likes to imagine themselves somewhere else, but you're not necessarily luring them in a pandemic when they should probably shelter in place for the time being. So just being relevant, being authentic, consistent, and just getting started are what to do. And everything that's opposite that is what not to do.
Right. Yeah. And speaking of evergreen, definitely can hear the tree. Ron, we're going to flip it back to you. So talk to us a little bit about, how to go about outsourcing content production.
Well, a lot of times businesses don't necessarily have the time to proactively manage a lot of these efforts, as Monica had mentioned. Once you pick a lane, try to be consistent, work on it, and then expand. So if you're looking at content production and you want to start increasing visibility, you can start off by writing a few blogs, writing some core pillar pages of content on your website. You can expand into social. If you're nervous about posting on social, dive into the comments instead. Find ways to interact with your audience. Find ways to find the people that you're looking to educate, train, mentor, whatever it may be. They're out there. They're online. They're going to be able to, be part of that conversation with them.
Right.
And the follow-up question was what?
I don't know if I had a follow-up question, but I'm going to ask you one right now. Does that come into play with the customer journey? I don't know. That was something that you brought up. So, in your notes to me before we started. So I'm not an expert here. So I'm asking you, does that align with the customer journey? Like, how do you talk about the customer journey, I guess?
I think, the customer's journey starts at a lot of different places. I focus a lot of my efforts within the legal industry. So the customer's journey for a personal injury or a criminal defense attorney begins when that person gets pulled over for a DUI or gets into an accident. Their intent is to find an attorney and hire them because they're either in serious criminal trouble or they're significantly injured. Whereas if you take a look at a divorce attorney or maybe wills, estate planning, probate trust, things of that nature, that journey likely started much further along they're much further along their process when they initially call you. They did their research. They went out and spoke with trusted advisors. They spoke with their friends who might have had an experience with one of these things, and they want to get a little bit more information about a particular firm. They're going to go online and read the content that you're producing. They'll look at your social profiles. Obviously, your experience and your expertise are going to come into play. But when those prospects are calling those firms, their journey has already started. So one of the things that, we try to take a look at is keeping that cognizant, making sure that you understand that, because the intent for each of those people is going to be very different.
All right, I got you. All right, Greg, we're going to bring you back in on this one. Maybe not this one, but...
I actually had a comment on what he was saying. So,
go ahead. Oh, both of you did? All right, that's great. Greg, start with you because you haven't talked in a while. Monica, you can, hide the tree for a little bit.
Hide the tree a little bit. Ron, no, you hit the nail on the head when it came to that. Like when you were talking, I was just picturing like all the different, businesses I've worked with over the years. And, that's something you have to get out up front as well. Like when I talked about earlier, what's the goal of this marketing strategy? How long does it typically take you to convert an inquiry to a sale, to a client? And you've got to get all that information up front. So, like another example, I know we kind of leaned in the legal industry with you. IT, it's very big right now. A lot of people, when COVID hit, had to be set up remotely. A lot of different companies had to figure it out quick, but typically that is a very long-term sale because there's so many different aspects of it. If you're looking to, for infrastructure, you're setting up a brand new office building, right? You're going to take your time. You're going to do your research on the company you decide to take on job that size. Whereas, maybe if you're a vet, an animal hospital or something, your pet's sick, that's a much more quick transaction. You're a contractor, a plumber, and your basement's flooded. That's going to be whoever answers first. You're going to then convert and become a client there.
Go ahead, Monica. You're muted. Unbelievable. We're trying to run a professional show here.
I was just wanting to comment back on the customer intent. A large part of what I've done for larger e-commerce platforms is the customer intent. So although your marketing teams might have everything aligned where the metrics are being monitored properly, everything on the back end or the data synthesizing side has been all great and wonderful. But then when you get to the consumer facing side, for instance, you're looking for a 42-inch Samsung television, flat screen, all these specs you put into the search bar, and then all of a sudden you get a Bose stereo. I mean, what's the consumer intent? What's the customer journey in that case? It's going to be bad. They're going to feel frustrated. Or they try to add it to cart and they can't. Or they try to pay for it online and they can't. Something times out, or the credit card number is not going through. Whatever the case is, their customer journey and the customer intent is not quite aligned. But also, when we're looking at it from an SEO standpoint, customer intent, when you're Googling something or voice searching something, they're trying to understand with thousands of data points, what do you actually mean? So a lot of times when I'm doing keyword analysis, it's poor grammar, missing S's to make it plural or singular, whatever the case is. But Google's looking at it from what is the user intent? Is it there? Is it, I'm looking for 5 rings. What does that mean? Does it mean jewelry? Does it mean a cell phone that rings 5 times? Any number of options are there. So customer intent needs to be monitored and constantly changes.
Gotcha. All right. Anybody else got anything? Want to add on that at all? No? All right, great. All right, Greg, I'm going to actually ask you this question, and this is kind of maybe we're going too far back into what you said earlier, and maybe you touched on some of these already, but you were talking about the vanity metrics and things that you're looking at to determine whether or not a campaign is actually successful. What are some of the things that are the most important metrics to be looking at to determine whether or not this is working?
Yeah. So as I touched on before, if you're e-commerce, like we've alluded to a couple times, sales. That literally is it. I mean, your entire purpose of being online is to sell off your website or your app. So that's the number one for that. If you're in a more of a service-based industry, you really want to look at calls and form fills off your website, actual inquiries that people reaching out to you. You want to look at the quality of those. You want to say, is this person soliciting me for some kind of garbage out there, or is it an actual interested party in my business? Is it somebody that is going to book a service with me? And then you want to take that a step further. Okay, I got this many inquiries that were valid. How many of those did you close? If somebody's calling you for your service but you can't close them, that's when you put it back on the business owner a little bit and say, why am I not closing these? As marketers, we could, it's been said 1,000 times, we could lead a horse to water, we can't make it drink.
Right.
I think that's a really important point when you start talking about finding those results, right, Greg? Because a lot of times when you take a look at some of these metrics, for example, when you're brand building, you don't find a report in HubSpot or Marketo or a Salesforce dashboard that's going to tell you how your brand awareness has necessarily increased, right? That's that missing one-to-one attribution part that we talked about a little bit earlier on. There's ways that you can find out whether or not the efforts that you are putting forth to increase your brand awareness are successful. Is our direct branded traffic increasing to your website month over month, year over year? Are you seeing that trend continually grow as you put out evergreen type of content to expand your reach? There's a lot of instances where let's take it for performance marketing, paid ads. You can get that one-to-one. You put up a paid ad, the person clicks it, they call the firm or they call the business, and they either retain or buy that product. Yes or no. It's very simple, but the water gets a little muddied when you start to try to gauge some of these awareness metrics, or if you're on social, likes, impressions. Yeah, you want to make sure that your audience is seeing those things, but I try to tell my clients, take a look at the people that are engaging with that content. Are they your ideal prospects? Are they your clients? Are they commenting? Are they sharing your information with their audience because they found value in it? That's really, really important. When you break it down even further from the business perspective, and Greg, you talk about those calls and conversions. When I'm evaluating whether or not a law firm is successful in some of their marketing efforts, I'm taking a look at, yes, obviously their Google Analytics. I want to see what type of visibility they're getting, but those calls, those inquiries, are they qualified? To Greg's point, are they converting? And at that point, I can take a look at my overall ad spend and really get a really good sense of what my average, cost per lead is going to be. When I understand what my cost per lead is, I now have a benchmark and I have something that's a little bit better for me to determine whether or not some of the things that I'm trying to do are actually successful.
And Ron, piggybacking off that, we could even take it a step further, and this is why, working with somebody like yourself is very beneficial. In legal, it can, there's going to be those multiple offenders that are rebooking that same lawyer to get them out of trouble time and time again. But if you look at other industries, like let's say you're a general contractor, right? So initially, the initial lead came in to have somebody redo a basement. But then in 6 months, they're like, okay, now I'm ready to attack that guest bedroom. Redo that, redo the bathroom. And you can start to look at a lifetime value of a lead. If you keep an eye on it, you stay organized, you have a good CRM, and that's how the metrics you just were discussing, the cost per lead, kind of evolve over time. You get to see the lifetime value of what originated as a click.
So I have a question on that too, for I guess anyone here. Is there an importance to getting more leads?
Just stealing my thunder, taking the co-host role here. That was going to be my next question, but yeah, I like it. It's a good question.
Mind.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think so, but I'll let you rip on it, Monica.
Well, I mean, my argument is you don't need more leads, you need better clients.
Yeah, I mean, I think that more leads can lead to, increased revenue, but sometimes when we're talking about, the intake process, is there something that's broken while you're trying to onboard a client that can be improved that might even better their experience? So sometimes I'll walk into a firm and I'll see that they're getting X amount of phone calls and they're saying, we need more calls. We need more leads. We're not getting enough. And then I go into the data and I take a look and I'll highlight missed calls. I'll highlight after-hour calls. I'll highlight calls that didn't have a return phone call back within 24 hours. I'll take a look and look through the notes. If they have a CRM, it's beautiful. But if they have even an Excel workbook with some note to say, said they would call back, left a voicemail, or left an email. So what do you do 2 or 3 days after that prospect has not returned that phone call or said that they were going to call you back? I think when you tighten up that intake process and your lead management process, there's an opportunity there to really squeeze more juice out of the investment that you're spending. If you have plateaued and you need to consider other channels to increase that lead volume, it's certainly an option. But before you spend additional investment in additional dollars and have something else that you need to manage, you could probably take a look at your own data today, right now, and see if you're missing any opportunities or gaps that can be tightened up.
Sorry, Monica, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I love having a process for everything because then you can truly compare apples to apples and make sure that people are being called back when they should be or emailed when they should be, and not to a point where it's annoying when it's like a service industry, like what Ron works with, but just making sure that you're not getting all those leads for nothing. And
then to take it a little bit further is, all right, after Ron, that's the proper first step, right? Let's analyze these leads that we do have. And then after you've done your follow-up, after you really exhausted each and every one, you really want to take a look at the channels that are bringing in the leads, period. Because if you have one channel that is bringing in, let's say, 100 leads a month, but you're not being able to get a hold of 99 of them after your follow-up, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and then you find this other channel that only brings 25 leads, but you've spoken to all 25, half have become clients, you want to then maybe pull some, you're basically saving time and money if you take it out of that strategy that's not converting at a higher rate long term, and then focusing on the channels that work. So you're not spending more money or adding additional funds, you're spending it smarter.
Yeah.
Great. So Greg, I want to ask you a question. One of the things that, like, you know, I mean, we've known each other for a while now, and I've heard you talk about this stuff quite a bit. Like, I'm curious to know, like, when, like, what is the timeline? Like, how do you, like, judge when a campaign is being successful? I mean, obviously, if you're seeing a return on, you know, your efforts, that's one thing. But, like, how do you push through? Like, if you're not seeing returns right away, how do you keep, like, is there a time frame that you're looking at? Like, how do you decide when you just keep pushing forward or when you have to adjust and try to figure some different things out?
No, that's a great question, Mike. So
Thank you.
You're welcome. So it really depends on the strategy you're talking about. First of all, you don't make any moves for 30 days, period. Like, you set something up, you approve it to start up with this strategy. You don't even look at metrics for 30 days because there's not enough data in a couple days or even a couple weeks to really make an informed decision. You really want at least a minimum of 30 days. After 30 days, you have enough data to make decisions about the campaign, what you want to do, what improvements you want to make. And then to answer the other part of your question, typically when it comes to SEM or Google AdWords campaigns, you really can see pretty significant results in 60 to 90 days tops, with some results coming in that first 30 day, because you've got people that are actively searching for your service. They're ready to go. They're going to Google looking for you. They're in buying mode a lot of the time. If you're talking about more of like a social media advertising campaign, whether that be Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, I always caution people that it really does take 4 or 5 months to see results there. And the reason being, think about it. If you go on Facebook or LinkedIn and I'm targeting you based on the industry you're in, you know, maybe your age, income, whatever they're targeting you by, you're not on social media looking for that ad. You might not even see it the first couple times. So it does take a little bit of time for those to kick in and work and really understand if it's a success or not.
Go ahead, Micah.
There are some companies that build their entire portfolio of business on, like, Instagram, right? I think Rothy's Shoes is one great example of that, where they just put money into, I guess, going after people that also follow, like, Lululemon and Athleta and all these other trendy companies. And the premise of the shoe also is that it's comfortable, it's packable, it's for a certain kind of lifestyle, but it's all focused on social. So if they're taking 4 to 5 months to be found on social, that might actually even be better than and more sustainable than doing SEO blogs. And there are sometimes some industries, some clients where it makes sense to do just SEO or just SEM, or kind of have it weighted one way or the other. What's your take on that if a company were to try to build their brand on social only or mostly?
I mean, I think it depends on the company, the industry, the target audience that they're going after. You know, that's a tough one.
Tough question.
I mean,
That's what we do on this show, man.
Yeah, I'm not really a shoe guy. I'm not really shopping for.
Well, not just shoes, but if it was a product for some revolutionary bourbon product, let's say.
Oh.
And, right.
Yeah, then it would work.
Right, and they're targeting the equivalent of, instead of Athleta or Lululemon shoppers, we're looking at people that also like, let's say, cigars and certain kinds of cars or whatever you want to.
Speaking my language now, Monica.
Right.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So now, you know what? Now I can see. I can put myself in that situation, and yes, that does work over long term. As my wife will kindly point out, I buy way too much stuff on Facebook that I probably should.
Ads work.
You know, that decanter, J&R gets me on there pretty good. You know, so yeah. So I think it's so after you kind of put it like that and put it in, you know, a way that's is appealing to me personally, yeah, then you can absolutely do that because your audience is there. You just have to make sure you're targeting them correctly and you're targeting the correct audience.
What about service industries like Ron, you work with lawyers, and I don't mean to take the co-host position, but I'm just
Run with it. You're doing great. It's taking all the pressure off of me.
As you know, if we're talking about initially what Greg hit on, the performance marketing, paid ads, typically you're going to know within 3 to 6 months whether or not that's really working. You will see the data. You will know what the conversions are. You can track it. You can one-to-one see what the attribution is. If we're talking about an outfit like yourself where it's content development, that's going to take significantly more time. It's, after it's been indexed, depending on the competition for those particular keywords that you're targeting, you have to exercise a little bit of patience. It just doesn't come overnight. When you look at it from a branding perspective, I think you can break it into an individual or the business. I think there are not many businesses out there that are doing the branding thing incredibly well. Some that come to mind for me are Gravy and Gong. It's like you're listening to an actual person speak when their company page posts any type of content on LinkedIn. They've been doing this for almost the entire pandemic, and now constantly you see all of these Gong and Gravy employees that are building a personal brand, building up visibility and awareness across the channel. They're not selling. They're sharing their experiences, their expertise. They're giving you insight into their belief values, their belief systems. That's something that takes a long time. There's a guy that I follow, Justin Welch. He's all about personal branding. He's got a playbook for it. He says, go out for a year, write every single day to your audience without selling, without a call to action, and then they start to come to you. Then you start to build that awareness and a personal brand within the market. It takes a lot of time, but just to Greg's point and yours, Monica, there's so many different variables. What's your posting frequency? Are you using hashtags correctly? Are you trying to game the algorithm? Just don't worry about that stuff. Just go out, write the content. If people enjoy it, they're going to consume it and engage with you. But that timing question is something that people will really get tied up with. Just
right, because you're spending the money. Yeah, you're spending the money, and if you don't see that money coming back to you at some point, you're like, "What's going on?" Greg, why aren't you doing what you told me you were going to do? But it's about just being patient and working through it, right?
But a good reputation for personal branding is kind of priceless, right? Because they might not buy from you the first month, and the first month of your time might cost you $2,000, right? But by month 12, now they know you, they like you, and they trust you, and they want to engage with you. They want to refer maybe some business to you, either their own or somebody that they know. So that investment, pays off over time. Thanks, Ron.
Definitely. I want to flip it on the host right now.
Oh boy.
For a second.
Uh-oh.
You're asking me the hard-hitting questions now?
Seriously.
All right, I'm ready.
For the past 8+ months,
Yep.
You've been producing your own content by means of a video series and now a podcast. Talk to us about what your ROI you've seen within 8 months. Are you saying, I'm just going to stop doing this podcast stuff? I haven't been getting enough business from it yet. Or have these efforts been successful?
I think they've been successful. Yes, they've been successful. So for me, I mean, it started out so I'm in the service industry. I sell title insurance, right? So my whole job, and for the listeners that don't know, title insurance is regulated across the board. So it doesn't matter what company you go to, you're going to get charged the exact same price for the exact same product, essentially. It's just relationships and service. It's all it is. And for better or worse, I just try to keep my face out there as much as possible. And the one thing that I was really fearful of when this all started was that because I wasn't able to take people to lunch or go to big events or, go visit clients and all that kind of stuff, there was going to be a point where people were going to forget who I am. Because if you're not in their face all the time, they're going to forget about you. And then, maybe you see them next year when we're actually able to do some in-person events. They're just like, oh, hey, I totally forgot that you were selling title insurance. So the whole point of all the stuff that I've done between the networking events and the LinkedIn video series stuff and now the podcast has just been to put myself out there as much as possible. And I think the way that the real estate market right now is moving so slowly, it's hard to gauge whether or not it's like a huge impact, but I am getting a lot more like quality engagement from people that I actually want to talk to. Like my network is expanding. I am getting deals from this, whether indirectly or directly. So I would say yes, like me just, trying different things and figuring out what works and what does, I keep going with it. If I don't think it's working, then I just kind of let it go and not really pursue it anymore. So yes, that's the very long answer to your question. I would say that, trying to build up this Morning Spotlight brand with the merch, and the all the stuff that I'm doing, I think I have seen, I'm very happy with how it's gone so far. And I'm just excited to kind of see as we progress through this. And then eventually I'm able to couple this with the in-person stuff. I think that's when I'm going to start to see even more return on what I've been doing.
Hall of Fame answer from a Hall of Fame question.
There you go.
That's exactly what I tell clients to do, right? Like if the old way isn't working, let's try a new way. Because if your ads weren't working back then, doesn't mean they won't work now. If your content wasn't working back then, it doesn't mean it won't work now. So you just have to keep doing it. You keep doing the same thing, you'll get the same results, right? But if you do something different, you might get better results. And Mike, you're doing a great job, exposing the brand out there, making sure everyone knows your face, knows your name, whether they want to or not, that you're popping up in their feed.
Yep.
So you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're essentially doing everything that you said you used to do, right? But now you're doing it digitally.
Right.
You reinvented your approach without really reinventing it. Like you said, your industry is heavily regulated. There's no price difference between who you go with. Who am I going to go with? The guy who I tune into their morning spotlight show, I see all the time. They're top of mind when I find myself either needing it or knowing somebody that needs it.
Right. Thanks for all the kind words. Checks in the mail for all of you. So I know we did a couple, Monica, you were talking about the shoes, and Ron, you talked about the, whatever that company was called, Gravy and
Gong.
Gravy and Gong. Are there any other success stories or case studies that you guys can share? Does anybody have one on hand? Or were those the ones that you guys wanted to talk about? Anybody?
There's so many, right?
All right, give us one. Give us another one.
So working with certain larger clients for e-commerce, where a couple of years ago, probably over 10 at this point, when Pinterest was starting to become active, I was a proponent of saying, let's get these products on Pinterest, because I think it's like 80% of Pinterest's followers are female. They're on their mobile device more and more, or their tablet. And now they click on a product that looks pretty cool. It's curated board. Now they're more inclined to buy it because it looks pretty. It looks like a magazine. Pinterest does a really good job of it. And essentially it's just kind of like an internet bookmark, right? You can share your bookmark list with somebody else, and now all of a sudden you have great pumpkin spice ideas. Instead of banana bread, we're going to be going into pumpkin spice bread. So going with the trends, going with the times was super important, and it took them a couple of years to move forward. Similar to Walmart, it took them a couple of years to really understand e-commerce. And I think that they're still catching up a little bit. They're not to the level of Target or Amazon by any means, but they're getting there. And, eBay is also the largest world global marketplace, right? And that's all they've been doing is online internet all the time, and they've just gotten acquired because they were noticed for it. So, being the first to do something and kind of setting the trend is super important, I think, for a lot of the larger brands. But even the smaller brands can adapt to new technologies. I forget the name of the lawyer that I was told is on TikTok, and she's a really big hit. But she's just a
Kelly Rickert.
Yes, that's exactly who. But I mean, why would a lawyer, somebody that's professional, went to school for years and years, hundreds of thousands of dollars in bills, also be a TikTok phenomenon? I don't know. But it's working for her. I'm sure she's getting calls and she's getting noticed, and we're talking about her here, giving her another plug. So I think she's an interesting case study too, where you're thinking in an unorthodox way to reach a larger or a different audience.
Right. Greg, Ron, any success stories you want to share before we move into our closing segment? Oh, sorry. I should have directed that at one person. So, Greg, why don't you go? We haven't heard from you.
All right. Sounds good. I think it's really just a success story. Is one of my clients have been with me for, a few years now. And when COVID kind of came around and had to transform the way they do things, it kind of coincided with their busy season. They do a lot of weddings and everything like that. So we had to transform what, we marketed for them, and they kind of came to me and said, what do we do here? Like, I built that trust where they were going to follow my lead. And we remarketed it instead of focusing on promoting weddings. We focused on, they do a lot of different rentals. So we focused on contractor equipment rentals. That was one industry that boomed during all this because people were home, right? So guess what? If they've been putting off getting that patio built or that yard, somebody needed an excavator or something like that, this was the time to do it. So we pushed those services. And then once the restaurants started opening back up for outdoor dining, we really pushed their tent rental services. So, it's really just, the people that were able to reinvent themselves and without really reinventing themselves, sort of like you did, Mike, are really the ones that are success stories during all this.
Right. Ron, take us home with the success before we wrap this up.
Sure. So great personal story here. Handful of years ago, my wife and I buy a 3-bedroom apartment. 4 years later, we have twins. Now all the rooms are filled. Now we hit a global pandemic, have no space. So now I need to buy a new home. And while I'm in the middle of trying to build a business, I'm working with a colleague, Monica, who puts together these incredible networking events. And on one of those networking events, I met this guy who sells title insurance. And when I bought the home, who did I go to get my title insurance from? Didn't know you from Adam, but we got to talk on some networking calls. We developed a friendship. You hosted me on the Morning Spotlight series, and now we're here on the podcast. And I trusted you. You built that awareness, and there's a case study right there.
Like the greatest love story ever told.
He's definitely making a case for Hall of Fame.
I mean, I think you're doing pretty well. Yeah.
All right. Full circle.
Yep, full circle. All right, here we go. We're going into our closing segment now. So this has been great so far, and I'm expecting some good closing segment points. Closing segment's Under the Spotlight, where we put each of you under the spotlight, and you're going to give our listeners the one thing that you want them to walk away from this episode with. And maybe it's something we already talked about. Maybe it's something that we didn't touch on, but you think it's super important. You want to make sure that they hear it before they sign off this episode. So, Greg, we're going to start with you. We're going to put you under the spotlight. You're on, let's see what you got.
Thanks. So what we'll do is, I really want to just leave people with this. Keep a spotlight on your marketing strategy. Really keep an eye on it. Don't set it and forget it. I see that every day. Really make sure you're watching, you're looking, you're gauging the results, you're going through, you're following up the leads that are coming in. Don't just flip a switch and assume it's going to work. So just stay on it and make adjustments as necessary.
I also love that you used the spotlight in your Under the Spotlight segment. That's Hall of Fame material. That's how you get on the wall. All right,
Mount
Ron.
Rushmore spotlight.
Right, Mount Rushmore, yeah. All right, Ron, you're up. Under the Spotlight, what do you got for us?
I'll offer more of a prediction.
Okay.
Just having been in, biz dev consulting, marketing, sales roles for 15 years here, I see the lines blurring between the traditional account executive and sales rep and, whatever you want to call it, the marketer, demand gen, lead gen leaders. That collaboration that we touched upon initially during the discussion here is so important. Understanding the contribution that both sides are putting forth to drive revenue. Again, I'm trying to adopt this philosophy. If I fall flat on my face in business, I'm trying to build up a reputation, through my posts, so that if I ever wanted to go to, who knows, legal tech operator or some other organization within that field, they can actually see what I have to say for quite a period of time. You can take a look at someone like yourself selling title insurance. That line is blurred. You are creating the marketing yourself. You are creating the awareness yourself. And I see as we move forward to that, if you're in one of these marketing and or sales positions, to kind of take a look at this seriously, because that's where I see those professions really going and being a blended role versus these separate entities that we've seen in the past.
Right. Awesome. Monica, take us home.
All right, guys. So I think my spotlight takeaway for everyone is just create really good content. Make sure it's intentional. Make sure it's authentic. whatever platform you put it on, even if it's just a podcast that you post, whatever's measured is rewarded. So although you're posting authentic and good content, is it resonating? Is it what people want to hear? Is it relevant? Taking a pulse and understanding what people actually want. So just be yourself and create good content so that everyone has a good experience on the internet. That's it. Simple.
Awesome. That was great. So for everybody listening, if you want to learn more about Greg, Ron, or Monica, I will put their contact information in the show notes. So make sure if you have questions, if you want to learn more stuff about what we were talking about today, you reach out to them. Obviously, they're all great people, very knowledgeable, so they'll definitely help you out wherever you need. If you want to be a guest on the Morning Spotlight, or if you want to hear us talk about a specific topic, email us at themorningspotlight@gmail.com or go to themorningspotlight.com and fill out the form. I want to thank, again, Greg Markowitz, Ron Latz, Monica Dema. Couldn't have done it without you guys. Thanks for doing this with us today.
Thanks for having us on.
Absolutely. And everybody else, thanks for
great time.
Absolutely. I had a great time too. And Ron, before we sign off here, Hall of Fame, baby. That was great. You did great. Way to go. And everybody else, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.